Good morning, my name is Lauren, and today I'll be touching on some preliminary insights into the need for and value of monitoring fish, sharks and rays in the deeper reaches of the iSimangaliso Wetland Park Marine Protected Area to aid in its effective management. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues and co-authors for their work and significant contributions to this presentation. You may have already heard about the broader objectives of the Oceans Alive project earlier in the session. Scientifically, the project aims to support an effective regional network of connected marine protected areas within the East African marine ecosystem in the Southwest Indian Ocean. The goal is to contribute to delivering improved management at iSimangaliso, an important marine biodiversity hotspot that is ecologically connected to a network of MPAs to the north in Mozambique and to the south in South Africa. The presentation builds on work done previously in the park, including extensive surveys of the photic or inshore reefs and assessing their fish and shark communities done by colleagues at RE and SIAB. The iSimangaliso MPA was expanded in 2019 offshore and southwards, incorporating the old Maputoland and St. Lucia MPAs. The MPA itself is important for several reasons, not least because it represents South Africa's entire portion of the Delagoa bioregion, which you can see extends from Cape Vidal all the way to the Kosi Bay border with Mozambique. The position of iSimangaliso at South Africa's border with Mozambique also makes this an important region to understand transboundary movements of species. With its recent expansion, the MPA now includes significantly deeper habitats to over 2,200 meters. Specifically, the mesophotic depth zone, which is roughly delineated at 30 to 150 meters depth, is considered the link between shallow and deep marine ecosystems in tropical and subtropical systems like iSimangaliso. Collecting baseline biodiversity information in the mesophotic would help us assess three factors. Does the mesophotic act as a refuge for species depleted by fisheries inshore, and therefore merits protection and proper enforcement? Does the mesophotic hold unique biodiversity, prioritizing it for inclusion in long-term monitoring efforts to reflect the full biodiversity of the park? And functionally, are there important processes and essential habitats represented in the mesophotic that are key for feeding, spawning, breeding, and growth? Emerging studies elsewhere suggest that all three are important in the mesophotic zone. Baseline surveys at depth in iSimangaliso are therefore important to ground truth these ideas in the park. Where scuba surveys are typically limited by depth to photic reefs, and surveys by submersible or remotely operated vehicles at depth are sometimes limited by cost, baited remote underwater video or stereo video systems called Stereo-Bruvs have become popular for standardized sampling across different habitat types and depth zones. Cameras are deployed to the seafloor for an hour to remotely record the marine life in their field of view. In 2017 and 2018, 120 Stereo-Bruvs were deployed in the St. Lucia restricted and sanctuary zones with a mixture of samples across canyon and non-canyon sites that you can see circled in red. In 2020, 35 Stereo-Bruvs were deployed in northern iSimangaliso, which if we zoom in, can see were placed within restricted use zones where pelagic fishing occurs and sanctuary zones which are fully protected, extending from Rocktail Bay in the south to Kosi Bay in the north. And you can see by those purple circles that these were extended to depths of 40 to 150 meters. Preliminary results from a subset of the data that are still being processed have thus far recorded 39 teleosts representing 19 families in the mesophotic. The take-home from this slide really is that species unique to the mesophotic are being detected among the groupers, snappers, and wrassers. This takes us back to the point about monitoring and managing a representative complement of biodiversity. and is a first potential indication that effective protection of the mesophotic in iSimangaliso is important to represent biodiversity. Moreover, adult individuals of endangered red Stereo-Bruvs, vulnerable black musclecracker, and vulnerable Scotsman were recorded. Again, a potential preliminary indication for iSimangaliso that mesophotic reefs may indeed be acting as important refugia and may play a role in replenishing depleted stocks inshore. But what of the elasmobranchs, the sharks, rays, and skates? Well, they're of particular interest because 1/3 of sharks and rays are threatened globally, with 43% of species threatened in the Western Indian Ocean specifically. Of the 1,199 species of sharks and rays that were newly assessed under the IUCN Red List criteria earlier this year and late last year, it's been concluded that 37.5% are threatened with extinction, and we know that species are disproportionately threatened in tropical and subtropical coastal waters. So of the 155 samples collected and analysed, the majority have fallen in the shallowest mesophotic depth category between 50 and 100 meters. That's so far. However, where sampling can and could extend to 250 meters, the importance of detecting unique species at depth once more emerges. A naturally uncommon top predator, a deep-water species like the sharp-nosed seven-gill shark, represents those at risk as bycatch in deep-water trawl or demersal long-line fishing. And so recording it at 235 meters in iSimangaliso again illustrates this important idea of detecting baseline information about species that typically range deeper, in the case of the sharp-nosed seven-gill, between 300 and 600 meters depth. Of the most frequently observed shark species, an interesting note to date is that of the human's whaler shark, a species only formally recorded in 2014. Of the most frequently observed ray species, an important conservation note is that of the white-spotted wedgefish, a critically endangered species that happens to move into the park and into Mozambique during winter. However, again, the highlight from this slide is the consideration actually of the seafloor type on which each species was recorded, which is an important consideration moving forwards with surveys into the future. And that is to highlight the inclusion of soft sediments and low-profile reef, which was commonly where most of these species are recorded. Moving away from the sole focus on high-profile reefs, which we prioritize largely for teleost species, and have focused on a lot in the photic zone. This may be an early sampling artifact where searching for high-profile reef at depth in novel areas has had us miss key survey sites, but as surveys progress, the consideration remains that there is value in surveying across different habitat types at depth wherever possible, especially where there may be differences in zonation that should be assessed. I'd like to end with some of the detections of species of key conservation and management interest from the 10 families and 27 species of elasmobranchs detected in the data set so far. We've already spoken about the white-spotted wedgefish, but it's a species that represents one of the most threatened groups of rays within the elasmobranch group. 9 out of 10 wedgefishes found globally are critically endangered, and the status of the white-spotted wedgefish is unassessed in South African waters. What we do know is that the species moves into and out of iSimangaliso. So assessing its occurrence across different management zones and increasing monitoring towards the border where they move into Mozambique, pairing with acoustic telemetry results, could be key to improving our knowledge of their transboundary movement. Critically endangered scalloped hammerheads occur from Port St. John's to Mozambique, and they require monitoring in pelagic waters up to depths of 1,000 meters. These records are important considering iSimangaliso's role in connecting MPAs in the north and south. To the south of the park, the Tugela banks are known as nursery grounds, and there are large annual congregations within the Protea Banks MPA. Having standardized surveys across multiple MPA sites paired with animal movement data could give us a holistic view of connectivity along the east coast of highly mobile, highly threatened species like hammerheads. And finally, a renowned shark, somewhat, in iSimangaliso, and a photo of a male one for a change at depth. Female ragged-toothed sharks are known to move when pregnant into iSimangaliso. So the species is of management consequence to detect when it is in the park, not least because strict diving protocols should guide interactions where these animals are conserving energy for gestation. In conclusion, quickly, it appears that using Stereo-Bruvs to monitor inphotic and mesophotic regions of iSimangaliso has potential for providing standardized data from inshore to offshore, and the proposed plans to continue monitoring with our partners at SIAB in the southern extension of the MPA and looking at long-term monitoring protocols for the northern and central sections will be of value. I'd like to end by thanking our key funders of the Oceans Alive project, the Blue Action Fund, and noting, in addition to our partnership with SIAB and contributions and collaborations with ORI, our partnership with iSimangaliso and Ezemvelo KZN Wildlife. Thank you.